Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we're here today to talk XCOM 2. The long-awaited sequel to Enemy Unknown is finally in our hands, and it's a glorious day. It's a glorious day for many an XCOM fan out there. Now, I've only got to sink about 4 to 5 hours in the game so far. You guys are going to be seeing what is technically the second official mission in the game outside of the story tutorial sites. Tutorial story style stuff. So what I wanted to do is just give you guys my initial impressions. I haven't really got to touch too much of the base building. Obviously, there's just a lot of stuff about the game to learn. But as someone who spent a lot of time with Enemy Unknown, I did want to give you guys my sort of first few hours. My thoughts on the first few hours of XCOM 2. And I'm happy to say that the first just 2 hours of XCOM 2 showcases a lot of the changes that they've made to XCOM to make it a better game overall. Not just the combat, but also the story presentation, the overall presentation quality as a whole is just massively improved from what we saw in Enemy Unknown. And just everything about the game just feels better. It just feels like a better experience. So yeah, kudos to Firaxis from the start right there. But let's start by talking about the story elements of the game. Let's talk about that story presentation and also the story as a whole. Where is XCOM 2? When does it take place? What happened at the end of XCOM Enemy Unknown? And this is something that I'm actually really stoked about. I'm stoked about the way Firaxis did this. So what they did was they looked at the number of players who failed their first XCOM Enemy Unknown playthrough and compared it to the number of players who were successful in their first playthrough. When they realized that the number of players who failed was far larger than the number of players who succeeded, they decided to make that canon for the story. So what happened at the end of Enemy Unknown is that you lost. The aliens came down to Earth and they kicked the humans square in the face. The XCOM project disbanded, you as the commander went MIA, and the aliens took over Earth. They created the Unification Project, they created troops and soldiers and units called the Advent, and then they started to mend the human condition by creating alien-human hybrids. It's basically worst case scenario, Alien Invasion 101. So now in XCOM 2, you're back as the commander, you've been sort of discovered and rescued by the remaining members of the Resistance, which happened to be led, or at least in part led, by Central. The guy with the green shirt who was kind of all classic G-Men who didn't have that much character or personality. Yeah, he's back. He's very gruff. He's way more badass than he was in Enemy Unknown. And like a lot of the characters in XCOM 2, he just feels well established. He has a personality. He feels more memorable. And that's exciting. I really like seeing, more of the core character and story elements of XCOM being far more fleshed out in XCOM 2. They just feel more alive. They help the world have more depth. They help give everything a little bit more atmosphere. And as a whole, as a player, they make me feel more involved in what's actually going on in this universe. I feel like I'm a part of it. In a lot of ways, Enemy Unknown just felt like a really great turn-based strategy game that had an alien invasion setting. I never really felt like I was into the story or that I was a part of something special. I just okay, this is the XCOM project, aliens and stuff. Now it's we are the Resistance. This is what we stand for. This is what we fight for. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the overall story of XCOM 2. The fact that Earth is now invaded and controlled by aliens. But either way, they've done a killer job of it. The cutscenes, the cinematic presentation is far better than it was in Enemy Unknown. Character models are far more well done. Really, really detailed. I always liked what they did with Enemy Unknown. It wasn't an exceptionally detailed game, but they made sure that the character models had it where it counts. And it's the same thing with XCOM 2, but they've taken that detail level up a few notches, and I'm 100% on board for that. So what they've really done is they've come back, right, with the core elements that made Enemy Unknown so great. The combat, the actual turn-based strategy element, the ability to name and really have that personal connection with your soldiers, which will probably end up dying 3 minutes later, especially if you decide to name them after one of your best friends or perhaps your girlfriend and then park her next to a car that's on fire. That's what made XCOM Enemy Unknown so special. That stuff's all back, but now there's just a lot of other really nice bits surrounding that in XCOM 2. So that's really exciting. I'm stoked to see that. And if you guys decide to pick up XCOM 2, you're going to notice that right from the get-go with the first sort of story-based mission, a lot of really great presentation quality there. But let's start talking about combat, mission map layouts, all of that other good stuff, the other really important elements of an XCOM game. And I want to start by talking about the combat and the concealment mechanic that has been introduced. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves with Enemy Unknown, especially when you started to really replay the game again and again, like your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth playthrough for some of us, the start of a combat sequence involved a lot of crawling. Because of the way alien pods spawn on the map, you had to trigger them by going into their line of sight. So basically, they now know where you are, they're possibly going to fire upon you, and a lot of your soldiers could be in harm's way. So in order to prevent losing soldiers unnecessarily, you crawled and toggled your soldiers into Overwatch again and again and again until you just happened to have an alien stumble into your line of sight. It was frustrating, it slowed down the pace of the game, and as I said, for those of us playing on harder difficulties or on second or third playthroughs, it really sapped away a lot of the enjoyment in XCOM. In fact, I stopped playing Enemy Unknown on one of the harder difficulty settings, not because the game was so difficult, but because of that crawling. It was so immensely frustrating, it tore so much of the enjoyment out of the game for me. The concealment mechanic eliminates that, essentially. What it allows you to do is to be the ambushee this time around. You are now the, sort of the hunter lying in wait for these aliens. You know where they are, you can understand where their line of sight is clearly, and as long as you stay outside of that, you can move around the map in concealment at the start of the mission. This allows you to set up proper ambushes. So if you put, say, 3 members of your fire team in Overwatch in line of sight of a group of enemies, say an Advent patrol like you saw earlier on in this mission, you can then engage them with your 4th character. That will pull you out of concealment, but it'll also allow your characters in Overwatch to have a reaction ambush attack, which means they will instantly engage any of the soldiers or units that were in line of sight. Great thing now, too, is soldiers no longer shoot at the same guy. So much like you saw earlier on in this footage, we actually eliminated 2 soldiers, 2 enemy Advent simultaneously with 2 different members of our squad. It doesn't get much more badass than that. It really fixes a lot of those slow early game issues that Enemy Unknown has. It just makes the early game feel far more rewarding and satisfying, and it sets you up for the rest of the mission. How well those ambushes go definitely controls, in many ways, the overall success of the remainder of your mission. Now, once you get into the mission, yeah, you're doing a little bit more of that Overwatch stuff, but it's still not as bad as it was in Enemy Unknown. And overall, the flow of the game, the pacing of the game, the pacing of the combat just feels so much better. And I think that carries through with just how the AI now interacts with the player and the level design. And this is something I want to talk about, because in the past, in Enemy Unknown, there was a set number of maps. That was it, right? So if you went to New York City, chances are you'd play like the same 3 maps again and again and again. They've created procedurally generated environments this time around to make sure that the replayability level is as high as it possibly can be. You no longer have to go to Africa and deal with the exact same gas station again and again and again. Thank goodness for the power of procedural generation. Now, on top of that, the map designs themselves, while being procedurally generated, feel more organic to me. They feel less like environments that have been designed for the sake of a turn-based strategy game, and more like environments that have just been designed to look like locations that may exist in Africa or in New York City or wherever you are, and then you happen to engage in some turn-based strategy goodness with some alien scum on said maps. It all feels more organic, it all feels more alive, more atmospheric, it just all feels better, far more effectively and efficiently crafted than anything that existed in Enemy Unknown. A lot of fancy big words, but that's just how I feel about the game. It just feels better as a whole. And I haven't even got into the real deep and meaty, juicy parts of Enemy Unknown, of XCOM 2 yet. There's so much more I have to learn about this game. But let's talk a little bit more about the combat, right? Because, I have got to play a couple missions now, and I have to say the combat feels more precise and more aggressive. It's not that you don't want to take your time, and it's not that you don't really want to think out your next move, but I do feel like I was rewarded for being more precise in my movement. The more time I spent mucking about making unnecessary moves in any given turn, the more likely the aliens were to get the jump on me and end up turning the tables. The more effective I was in, thinking ahead, making really efficient tactical maneuvers, the more I was rewarded for that with, really great flank setups, higher opportunity kill shots on enemies. I just felt rewarded for being more efficient, and that just makes sense. In a turn-based strategy game, you should be rewarded for being more efficient. and you should be punished for spending too much time lollygagging about thinking the aliens are going to wait all day for you to line up that perfect shot. So I like that. The combat feels more rewarding already, even in the early game. Like I said, I haven't even gotten into like advanced soldiers. You know, we have a lot of the tech tree stuff now. Not to mention the destructible environments. Those are a whole nother element that you can throw into your tactical know-how book. You know, the ability to blow through walls and ceilings, to use, you know, destructible and explosive gas tanks in the environment, like at gas stations, to blow up large groups of enemies. There's so many things in the environment, including destroying the environment, that you can now use to set up really great tactics to engage the enemy. You know, you got two sectoids, well, the new sectoid, I should say, behind a wall. Blow a hole in the wall, and there's a clear line of sight for your sniper without ever having to put anyone in harm's way. That's the kind of stuff that makes, you know, XCOM 2 combat feel already more special than Enemy Unknown's combat. And I'm really excited to dive deeper into it. Really genuinely am. The character customization as well, you know, your soldier customization is so deep now. You've got all these different camo patterns, different colors. You can change the color of your firearms. We've got a new loot system, so now enemies can actually drop loot, which you can pick up. It does have a destruction time, so there's a limited number of turns you have to pick up said loot, but then you can take it back. You can equip it on your soldiers. You've got red dot sights. You're going to have, you know, special weapons you can pick up. Like, they've just added so many mechanics into a turn-based strategy game that I think a lot of people would have looked at and said that'll never work in a turn-based strategy game, but it does. And I think that's what already, for me, makes XCOM 2 feel like a very, very special experience. And when you look at everything that goes on in the base building, all of the, you know, opportunities you have for research, even within the first 4 hours of the game, you recognize how big a game it is, the level of replayability it's going to have, and you just want more of it. That's the sign of a good game to me, is feeling slightly overwhelmed, but wanting to wade into that overwhelmingness. Is that a word? Wanting to wave into that pool of overwhelming. The pool of overwhelming, that is XCOM 2. That's how I feel about a lot of really good open world RPGs, when they feel like they've given me too many options to start, but as I start to work my way through them, things start to become more clear, and I start to create my own path. I start to designate my own path forward, and that's how you end up enjoying an experience like Enemy Unknown and like XCOM 2. So a lot of the game I still have to play, a lot of it I still have to experience. Looking forward to getting some proper soldiers with some proper abilities on the battlefield, messing around with the sharpshooter, all the character classes, diving into the base building. This is a big, meaty game, and a lot of us are going to be playing it for a very long time. Not to mention wonderful, wonderful mod support. Part of the reason Firaxis wanted to do a PC exclusive was to have more time to really work on mod tools and to make sure that the community that participated in the game had, you know, the best tool set for just making more awesome content. If that's what it takes, you know, if excluding the consoles to make a game that is more moddable, that's just a super intelligent move on their part. Some of the, you know, highest selling games of all time sold really well and continue to sell really well because they still provide mod support. Mods are indeed the friend, despite what DICE and EA would think as of recently. Modding keeps your game alive far more than any paid DLC ever will. And to be honest, if there is paid DLC for XCOM 2 at one time, all of us who are sitting here playing all these juicy mods from like the Long War team and anyone else who starts modding and putting stuff on the Steam Workshop, we're going to be more likely to buy that DLC because of the amount of enjoyment that we've been able to have with XCOM without spending a penny. Mods work, mods are good. Firaxis understands that. I'm very much looking forward to the future of modding in XCOM 2. And I can't wait to see some awesome skin mods. I'm hoping somebody does an overall theme mod that puts XCOM in a different universe, because that would just be wicked cool. I feel like XCOM's like a great base platform for altering what the game is actually all about. Take it out of the alien theme setting, or maybe a Star Trek mod. I'd like to see a Star Trek mod. Can I be Captain Picard? And can our home base be the Enterprise? That would just be fantastic. Modders are awesome. They make awesome content. They help keep games alive. Enough said. I'm going to go play some more XCOM 2 before I head over to work. I hope you guys are doing the same thing. If you have any thoughts or opinions of your own regarding your time with XCOM 2 or any questions for me, feel free to throw them down in the comment section below. I plan on covering a lot more XCOM in the coming weeks and possibly in the coming months. Tips, guides, let's plays, a lot of awesome XCOM 2 stuff. Stay tuned right here to the channel for more of that, and I will see you in the next one.